The Louvre Museum in Paris, France, or Le Musée du Louvre in my best possible French, is the greatest museum that has probably ever existed. Nowhere else on Earth puts you face to face with both the most famous painting in the world and two of the greatest sculptures ever made. With over 35,000 works on display, you could wander for days and still miss icons that changed art forever. Today, in this video, I'm going to cut through the chaos and dive straight into the 12 masterpieces you absolutely must see at the Louvre before you die. These are the works that define civilizations, ignite revolutions, and still leave millions speechless every year. If you go to Paris, these are not optional. They're essential. The Louvre started as a medieval fortress in the year 1190, later becoming a royal palace for French kings and queens. After the French Revolution in 1793, it opened as a museum for the public. Number 1 on our list, the Winged Victory of Samothrace. You probably expected the Mona Lisa to be number 1. Everybody does. But if we want to start our Louvre visit with a shockwave, with a masterpiece that still stops people in their tracks before they've even reached it, then the Winged Victory of Samothrace is the only place to begin. And unlike the Mona Lisa, you can actually see this one without being swallowed alive by a dozen tour groups and a sea of selfie sticks. The Winged Victory sits high atop the Daru staircase, and that placement is not an accident. As you climb the steps, she rises above you like a vision. The moment you turn the corner and see her, the air genuinely shifts. Even for people who don't care about art, this statue hits with the force of an ancient revelation, because that's what it is. She represents Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, landing on the prow of a ship just as the winds of triumph crash against her. The sculpture captures that split-second explosion of motion. The wings thrust back with violent energy. The fabric snaps against her body like it's alive. Her torso twists forward as if she's descending into glory. She has no head, no arms, yet she's more powerful in her incompleteness than most sculptures are in perfect condition. That's part of what makes her so unforgettable. Your mind fills in the missing pieces, and the emotion becomes even bigger. The Winged Victory was originally created as a monumental offering celebrating a naval victory, possibly by the Kingdom of Rhodes. It wasn't tucked into a temple or placed on a pedestal indoors. It actually stood on the prow of a stone warship positioned high on a cliff overlooking the sanctuary of the great gods of Samothrace. Wind from the Aegean Sea would have rushed past the statue exactly as the sculptor intended, and as you see her today. We don't actually know the exact sculptor, but we do know the style. It's the School of Rhodes, a group of Hellenistic, keyword Hellenistic, Greek artists who specialized in capturing dramatic movement and emotional extremes. So these are the same people responsible for the Laocoon statue, the sculpture that blew Michelangelo's mind, and you can now see that one in the Vatican museums. Check that out, by the way, in my video about the 5 museums you must not miss before you die, because you'll get to see that statue in it. Back to the Winged Victory. They didn't carve here calm gods or idealized bodies like the earlier Greek artists did. That's what makes Hellenistic art a little bit different. Instead, they carved crisis, motion, tension, life in the middle of upheaval. This was created around 190 BC during the Hellenistic period. This was the time after Alexander the Great, when the Greek culture had spread, mainly by him, across the Mediterranean and fused with Egypt and the Near East and beyond. Nike wasn't just a symbol, she was a political statement, a celebration of naval power, a declaration that a military victory wasn't just strategic, it was ordained by the gods. That even echoes in the politics of today. When she was rediscovered in 1863 on the island of Samothrace, she changed the Western understanding completely of Greek sculpture. She proved that ancient art wasn't all calm symmetry and polite poses. It could also be wild, kinetic, and explosive. The Winged Victory sets the tone, in my opinion, for the entire Louvre Museum. It tells you that this museum isn't just about masterpieces or even masterpiece paintings. It's about moments of human expression so powerful that they cross 2,000 years without losing a single ounce of impact. And speaking of works that have shaped global culture, next we're heading to the most famous face on the planet. But there's a reason that this next piece has become the global icon of painting. And it's not just the smile. Take a deep breath to look at number 2 on our list, the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. Now I say take a nice deep breath and soak this in because I'm doing that with you while I look at this beautiful painting, and I appreciate it so much more looking at it right now on my screen because it's so hard to see and enjoy in real life. It's wonderful to be able to talk about it and to see it on a big TV screen. This is one of the greatest paintings ever made, and it is the most famous. You knew we'd get here. The absolute most famous face on Earth. But I want you to forget the hype for just a second. Forget the memes, the bulletproof glass, and the endless sea of cameras that would be swarming around you, because the real Mona Lisa became the global icon of painting in a way that has surprisingly little to do with that Mona Lisa smile. Well, look closely, yes. That is a smile, but barely. It's a flicker. It changes depending on your angle and your mood. Leonardo engineered that effect with sfumato. That means the feather-light layers of glazes that blur edges so softly that the image seems like it almost breathes. Her eyes do the same trick. They seem to follow you. Leonardo understood how the human brain fills in motion and emotion even when the paint stays still. He wasn't just painting a portrait, he was painting psychology. The woman in the painting is almost certainly Lisa Gherardini, from a wealthy Florentine family. Mona simply means lady, so her actual title is Lady Lisa. And by the way, in French, they call her La Joconde. But here's what's wild, and revolutionary, really. She was not royalty. She was not a goddess, and she was not a mythic figure, nothing like what you just saw with the Winged Victory of Samothrace. Mona Lisa was a real woman, treated with the same mystery and significance usually reserved for saints. This wasn't a royal commission. It wasn't destined for a palace or a public display. Leonardo painted it for himself, and he kept it with him through Florence, then Milan, then Rome, constantly tweaking it, perfecting it, chasing a painting that never quite felt finished. When Leonardo died in France in 1519, he left the portrait to his assistant, and it eventually entered the French royal collection and later the Louvre, where it still remains a personal masterpiece that became a national treasure. Leonardo transformed portraiture. Before him, figures sat stiff, flat, and symbolic for the most part. He gave them depth, with atmospheric perspective in that surreal landscape that you can see. He gave it life with the subtle shifting expression and humanity. She actually looks like she's thinking. He was solving a universal artistic problem. How do you paint a soul? For centuries, the Mona Lisa was admired, but not a celebrity. Her stardom actually exploded in 1911 when she was stolen from the Louvre. Suddenly, newspapers around the world were plastered with her image. This wasn't just a painting anymore, it was a mystery, a story everyone wanted to be a part of. Since then, she has become the symbol of Western art, the measuring stick for fame, intrigue, and artistic brilliance. And that's the irony. The most viewed painting in history is also one of the quietest. No drama, no angels, no battle. Just a woman, alive in oil and imagination. But if the Mona Lisa is a whisper, our next masterpiece is a scream. We're heading to a painting so raw, so terrifyingly real, that it forced France to confront a scandal at sea. The Raft of the Medusa, where survival, politics, and human desperation collide on a massive canvas. So here we are at number 3, The Raft of the Medusa by Theodore Géricault. This painting is my personal favorite in the Louvre. It's really hard for me anytime I'm in Paris to not cough up the money and stand in line to get into the Louvre just to see this painting one more time. It's one of those huge canvases that completely sweeps me in. I actually love storms at sea, but the main focus here is the people and the diversity and the catastrophe and the real life story. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want to share how much I love this painting, and it doesn't always even make it into the top 5 at the Louvre, and it's my goal to change that. So the Raft of the Medusa roars. It's chaos, terror, hope, and death, all battling for space on a single giant canvas. And the most shocking part, like I said, it really happened. In 1816, here's the story, a French naval ship called the Medusa ran aground off the coast of Africa due to gross incompetence by its aristocratic captain. More than 150 people were forced onto a makeshift raft. For 13 days, they drifted, starving, dehydrated, and driven to cannibalism. Only 15 of the more than 150 people on that raft survived. So what Géricault does is he actually locks us in to the most intense moment. Survivors frantically wave toward a distant rescue ship, a speck of hope on the horizon, while below them, bodies collapse into the sea. The living cling to life, the dead are everywhere. And this painting does what art at its best does. We feel that. This wasn't meant for a king or a church. Géricault made it for the public, to expose a national scandal. When it debuted in the 1819 Paris Salon, it was explosive. A painting this massive, 23 feet wide, showing French citizens abandoned by their own government. Géricault was only 27 years old when he painted The Raft of the Medusa, and he went all in. He interviewed survivors. He built a life-sized raft model in his studio. He visited morgues to study decomposition, capturing tragedy with brutal honesty. He painted real human suffering, not myth and not legend, and France wasn't ready for the truth staring back at them. This painting marks the birth of French Romanticism, art driven by raw emotion, real people, and political rage. One of my absolute favorite movements in art. Happens to be right next to one of my other favorites, realism. No gods, no calm stoic heroes, just humanity in crisis. It shook the art world so hard that a young painter named Eugene Delacroix posed as one of the dying figures. And then he picked up the torch himself. He would create the next generation's revolution on canvas. Because if the Raft of the Medusa exposed the darkness of leadership, Delacroix would paint what happens when people take power into their own hands. A woman rises above the smoke of revolution, and she's not just a symbol, she's liberty itself. Number 4, Liberty Leading the People by Eugene Delacroix. Now, I hate picking favorites, actually, because then I look at another painting and I remember how wonderful that one is. This one gets enough glory, though, but the glory is well deserved. This is one of the most famous paintings in the world. If you know a little bit about art history, you've probably already seen it. If you've seen the musical Les Miserables, it probably rings a bell. It's kind of the same time period, and I think they based their first cover poster off of it. But what we have here is revolution. Revolution is messy, it's loud, it's chaotic, it's heartbreaking, the best things of art. And yet here, in the middle of a disaster, a nation can suddenly see who it truly is. And in this painting, France stands up and charges forward. Delacroix drops us into the July Revolution of 1830, when Parisians rose up against King Charles X. Smoke chokes the air in this painting. The streets of Paris are littered with bodies. Soldiers, civilians, the wealthy and the poor. Nobody here is spared. At the center rises Liberty herself, both real woman and mythic symbol at the same time. Barefoot, fearless, chest exposed in the classical style, she surges across a barricade of rubble and corpses, holding that tricolor flag high and a bayoneted musket in her other hand. Now, when we think of the French Revolution, we sometimes forget that that was actually after and inspired by the American Revolution. But this took place even further. She leads by example, not from a throne, but from the front line. And look who follows her. A working class man on her left, sleeves rolled up, muscular, wearing a white shirt and an apron. He grips a saber and fights with the desperation of someone who has nothing to lose. You also see next to her a bourgeois intellectual, right behind that left shoulder there. Dark coat, top hat, rifle in hand. This figure is often interpreted as the painter Delacroix himself, or the educated middle class rising with the people. There's a street boy to the right, young, wild-eyed, waving 2 pistols, kind of fun. He represents the Parisian gamins, the street kids who really did fight in 1830. Imagine your kid fighting in a revolution. Victor Hugo, the great French author, later used this image to inspire Gavroche, the character from Les Miserables. So this is the revolution, the working class, the middle class, the youth, all united. And beneath them in this picture, it has everything in here. It's a history lesson and an inspirational poem all in one. There's bodies, blood, fallen soldiers, a nearly naked man. Think about emotion, shock, and awe, sprawled on the pavement. A dead officer in blue with a red epaulette. Revolution's not clean, and Delacroix is refusing here to sanitize it. He didn't paint this for kings or churches, but as a tribute to modern freedom. The monarchy bought the painting at first, believe it or not, and then they quickly hid it away when they realized the message that liberty belongs to the people, not to those in power. Too dangerous to display. Even though this was in 1830 and the French Revolution had happened some years back, all of this was inspired as well by the American Revolution. So if you're American, you're going over here to the Louvre, there's a reason why you feel some inspiration with this picture. We have similar colors in our flag. We have some similarities in our history, both artistic and political. Delacroix was heir to Géricault's Romanticism. We just saw Géricault in The Raft of the Medusa, in the last painting we examined. All emotion, movement, and humanity, not chasing perfect anatomy or calm symmetry. This is truth through drama. Brushstrokes alive. The brushstrokes themselves are almost trembling. You can almost feel the hand of the person shaking as he's telling the story, like the moment is happening in real time, before movies, before even black and white photography. This painting became France's identity. Textbooks, posters, stamps, album covers, protest signs, all of it. The image of liberty striding over the barricade embodies the belief that ordinary people can change history and that future belongs to citizens, not kings. But after the fire of the revolution, the Louvre brings you back to something quieter. Next, I'm going to take you to another sculpture, a masterpiece of classical beauty that has survived nearly 2,000 years without arms, without identity, and yet still reigns as one of the world's most iconic sculptures, and it probably inspired the Lady of Liberty in this current painting. Number 5, The Venus de Milo by Alexandros of Antioch. Some artworks shout to be noticed. The Venus de Milo doesn't need to. She's calm, poised, and yet somehow one of the most recognizable faces and torsos in the world. Her secret? Confidence in stillness. This is Aphrodite, the ancient Greek goddess of love and beauty. But she is not the playful Venus of later Roman art. Remember, Venus is just the Roman name for Aphrodite. It's different here. She's not that playful Roman Venus. There's no doves, there's no Cupid. She stands in a quiet moment of power, weight resting on one leg in perfect contrapposto pose, her drapery slipping just enough to reveal the softness of her body underneath. She has barely any arms, yet she feels somehow complete. Her absence makes us imagine, what was she doing? Was she about to offer an apple, hold a shield, reveal herself, conceal herself? The mystery is all part of the magic. She was sculpted for a sanctuary on the island of Milos, likely to be worshipped in a niche or near an altar where worshippers brought offerings. She wasn't meant to be admired up close in a museum like this. She was meant to inspire devotion. In 1820, a local farmer found her buried in ancient ruins. The French Navy then swooped in, purchased her, and brought her to Paris, right when France needed a new icon after losing the Apollo Belvedere to the returning Pope. Venus became a symbol of French pride and the Louvre's new star. For years, people insisted this must be a masterwork of classical Greece, maybe even by Praxiteles. The truth? A lost inscription found near the statue, but later conveniently misplaced, named Alexandros of Antioch, a Hellenistic sculptor working centuries after the Golden Age. But if anything, that makes her even more important. Proof that beauty didn't peak in the past. It evolved. Venus de Milo perfectly captures the shift between classical and Hellenistic ideals. Classical Greece was balance, symmetry, and serenity. Hellenistic Greece loved drama, sensuality, and humanity. This Venus stands right at that turning point. Idealized yet alive with subtle emotion and real physical presence. She embodies a beauty standard that would shape Western art for millennia. But while this goddess stands in eternal elegance, just a few galleries away, another figure twists in agony, a masterpiece from a genius who sculpted the human body like no one before or after. Number 6. The Dying Slave by Michelangelo Buonarroti. Most sculptures celebrate victory or beauty. This one shows surrender, and heartbreakingly, Michelangelo makes surrender look like grace. A young man, strong as marble itself, finally letting go. This is a nude male figure, Athletic, idealized, almost divine. But he isn't triumphant in any way. His head tilts downward and sideways, his eyes are closed, and his body is sinking inward. One arm is pinned above his head, and the other rests helplessly at his side. This is the exact moment where life supposedly slips away. Michelangelo called him a slave, but not in any literal sense. He represents the human soul trapped in a body, struggling against fate, a struggle this figure has just lost. And yet, in defeat, he is beautiful. He was created for the grand tomb of Pope Julius II, the same pope who forced Michelangelo onto his back to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling. The tomb was supposed to be the greatest sculpture project of the Renaissance. Dozens of figures, massive architectural structures, a monument fit for an emperor. But then politics shifted and money dried up. The vision shrank. The dying slave and its companion, very nearby here in the Louvre, the rebellious slave, were left out of the final design. They became masterpieces without a home. Instead of guarding a pope's tomb, they became something even more powerful, standalone symbols of the human condition. Michelangelo carved bodies like no one else, not as anatomy studies, but as kind of philosophy in flesh. Muscles coil with emotion, bones become metaphors, and beauty meets suffering and agony. To Michelangelo, the body was a battlefield between spirit and matter, and sculpture was the attempt to set the soul free from the stone. The dying slave here feels like he's almost succeeded. This work bridges Renaissance harmony with the coming emotional thunder of Baroque art. It's serene and dramatic, a perfect tension. Art historians still debate the meaning of this dying slave. Is it a Christian soul freed from sin? Is it the artist himself oppressed by patronage or by society? Is it humanity or sexuality crushed by mortality and morality? Maybe all of these. Michelangelo didn't just carve humans. He carved our existence, our existential struggle out of marble. So we've looked at bodies that fight and bodies that fade. But to understand what shaped civilizations, what ruled and protected and controlled them, you have to look far earlier. Our next stop travels back nearly 4,000 years to a towering black stone covered in laws, a code that shaped the very idea of justice in the Western world. Number 7, the Code of Hammurabi. This isn't just a masterpiece here in the Louvre, it is a blueprint for civilization. Long before the Magna Carta, centuries before ancient Greece, even before Moses, a king carved justice into stone. And those rules still influence our laws today. This towering black basalt stele, over 7 feet tall, is engraved with 282 laws from Babylonian society. Property rights, marriage and family rules, wages and inheritance, and of course, crime and punishment. At the top, a carved scene shows King Hammurabi of Babylon standing before Shamash, the sun god and the divine judge. Shamash extends a rod and a ring, symbols of authority, granting Hammurabi the divine right to govern. The message here is clear. Justice comes from the gods, through the king to the people. This wasn't tucked away in a palace library. It was placed in a public temple where ordinary Babylonians could see it, or at least see that justice existed. Because the writing wasn't meant to be easily read, most citizens couldn't read cuneiform. So it wasn't a handbook, it was propaganda. It was saying, we have laws, we are fair, Babylon is therefore strong. And interesting, this stele was later stolen by the Elamites and taken to Susa, where it remained buried for millennia before its rediscovery. Hammurabi ruled the first Babylonian empire centered in Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the cradle of civilization, where writing, cities, and the wheel were all born. So while Egypt was building great pyramids along the Nile, while the ancestors of Greece and Rome were still prehistoric tribes, Babylon was already a powerhouse with sophisticated government and international trade. Babylon wasn't just the middle of the ancient world, it was the origin of many ideas that shaped it. This is one of the oldest surviving legal codes on Earth, a direct ancestor of modern jurisprudence. It proves that by 1750 BC, society wasn't just about kings and conquest. People demanded fairness, property protection, and order from their leaders. Every time you sign a contract, argue a case, or rely on your rights, you're living inside a system first articulated right here. Now that we've seen a king receive his authority from God, let's fast forward. We're going to jump again, huge leap, nearly 4,000 years, to a ruler who took that power for himself and made sure the entire world watched. Number 8. The Coronation of Napoleon, by one of my favorite painters, Jacques-Louis David. Most rulers are crowned by a king, or blessed by a pope. Napoleon Bonaparte didn't trust anyone else with his destiny, so he crowned himself in front of the world. And Jacques-Louis David made sure that moment would live forever. This massive canvas, over 20 feet wide, places us inside Notre Dame Cathedral on December 2nd, 1804. The church glows with gold and power. Napoleon stands tall at the center, holding a crown high in the air. But notice what he's not doing. He's not bowing to the Pope. He's not waiting for permission. In reality, Napoleon had already placed the crown on his own head moments before this scene. And here he lifts another crown to Josephine, his wife, as the Empress. She kneels with her head bowed and her hands folded in reverence. Every face here is arranged to witness Napoleon's glory, including his mother, who was not actually present, but David paints her here anyway, perfectly lit and looking on proudly. This painting was commissioned by Napoleon for the Tuileries Palace, a celebration and justification of his rise. Born a commoner on the island of Corsica, Napoleon wanted the world to see him as the rightful successor to Caesar and Charlemagne. So this wasn't art as decoration, it was propaganda, an empire on canvas. Jacques-Louis David was Napoleon's artistic weapon. He was a master of neoclassicism. He believed that art could shape politics and public emotion. His works are perfectly composed always, almost sculptural, clean lines, dramatic lighting, carefully choreographed symbolism. He didn't just document history, he staged it. David was so loyal to Napoleon that he even followed him into exile until the very end. This scene marks a turning point in Western history. A republic dies, an empire rises, and a self-made ruler puts himself above the church. Napoleon rewrote the rules of power, literally and visually. And David's monumental canvas became his official myth, the myth of Napoleon's greatness. Even today, when we imagine him, we imagine this: the confidence, the ceremony, the unstoppable will. And of course, Napoleon looks like the tallest person in the whole room in this master propaganda piece. But before Napoleon, David painted another kind of power. Not individual ambition, but the duty of citizens. A story from ancient Rome that became the rallying cry for the French Revolution is next. Number 9, the Oath of the Horatii, Jacques Louis David. Before Napoleon, before the Empire, Jacques Louis David painted a call to duty so powerful it helped ignite a revolution. This one isn't just a painting either. It's a whole manifesto. We're in ancient Rome. Two rival cities, Rome and Alba, are at war. Instead of a full battle, each chooses 3 champions to decide the outcome. Here, the 3 Horatii brothers stretch out their arms, swearing to defend Rome, even if it means death. Now, some call this painting the Oath of the Horatii. I have heard that pronunciation in American English. That's fine. I believe the original would be Horati. It's also said Horatii. So you can pick whichever one you like. Here in this magnificent painting, their father raises their swords high. The women collapse in grief because one is engaged to a man from Alba and one of the Horatii sisters is married to an Alban champion. No matter who wins, someone they love must die. Duty demands sacrifice, and sacrifice always demands tears. David arranges everything like a theater set. Men in one arch, rigid, angular, heroic. Women in another, soft, curved, emotional. And the father in the center, the bridge between honor and heartbreak. A perfect composition for a nation hungry for courage. The painting was commissioned by King Louis XVI for the royal palace, meant to inspire loyalty to the monarchy. But ironically, as the political winds shifted, the meaning of the painting changed. People saw the message differently. Not loyalty to a king, but loyalty to the people, to the nation. By the time it was displayed in the salon, it became a visual anthem for the French Revolution. Art had chosen a side. Jacques-Louis David was the leader of neoclassicism, a return to ancient Rome's clear lines, moral clarity, and civic duty and virtue. He rejected the frilly Rococo style of the aristocracy. He wanted strength, purpose, sacrifice. At the dawn of the revolution, he gave France exactly the story it needed to believe in. This painting marks a turning point. Myth is becoming political action, history is becoming inspiration, and art is becoming a weapon. It helped define the ideals of the new France: liberty, equality, and brotherhood. We've seen power, struggle, and civic duty, and now we step into one of the most surprising masterpieces in the Louvre, a sculpture that challenges everything we think we know about beauty, identity, and desire. Number 10, the Sleeping Hermaphrodite. Some artworks shout for attention, but this one whispers a secret, and it only reveals it once you've walked all the way around it. A sculpture designed to surprise, to delight, and to unsettle. A beautiful figure sleeps on a soft, rippling mattress. From behind, we see gentle curves, flowing hair in a serene pose, the very image of feminine sensuality. And then, as you move around, the body quickly reveals male genitalia. This is Hermaphroditus, a child of the gods Hermes and Aphrodite, a combining figure, male and female traits, all in one body. The reveal here was intentional by the artist. This is a game of perception. The ancient viewer is caught between what they expect and what is true. In imperial Rome, sculptures like this were made for elite homes and gardens, not temples. They were luxury decor, meant to spark conversation, laughter, flirtation, and even titillation. As curator Carlos Picon puts it, these were light amusements, signifiers of good taste. Owning Greek-style art showed wealth and worldliness. Hermaphroditus wasn't about progressive gender politics. It was about, look at how cultured I am. And despite the divine subject, Roman society was actually not tolerant of intersex people in real life. Ambiguous births were treated as bad omens and often, unfortunately, eliminated. Art here celebrated what society condemned. This work is a Roman marble copy of a lost Greek bronze, and it was popular. We know of at least 9 surviving versions of this sleeping Hermaphroditus type, plus roughly 30 related sculptures where Hermaphroditus appears in romantic surprise scenes with satyrs. This specific version was unearthed in Rome in 1608. Cardinal Scipione Borghese loved it so much he commissioned Gian Lorenzo Bernini, the superstar of Baroque sculpture, to carve the incredibly soft, billowing mattress that you see now underneath it. Bernini's addition heightens the sensuality and the surprise. Hermaphroditus represents a long artistic tradition of exploring identity, desire, and transformation, but always through a mythic lens. This is beauty that defies expectation, a reminder that attraction, curiosity, and discomfort have always coexisted in art. The sculpture's fame continued for centuries. Renaissance nobles displayed copies, Yves Saint Laurent owned one, and contemporary sculptors like Barry X. Ball still reinterpret it today. Across 2,000 years, one idea remains. Art can reveal more than it claims, especially when it catches us off guard. After this intimate, provocative encounter, we're stepping into the largest painting in the Louvre. A celebration filled with musicians, feasting nobles, and one quiet miracle. Water becomes wine. Number 11 on this epic list of masterworks that you must see if you go to the Louvre. The Wedding at Cana by Paolo Veronese. You're now standing in front of the largest painting in the Louvre. A monumental canvas so enormous that it makes the Mona Lisa look like a notebook page pinned to a wall. At about 22 feet tall and 33 feet wide, this isn't just a painting, it's architecture. And somewhere inside this riot of color, costume, and music, a quiet miracle is taking place. This is the Wedding at Cana from the Gospel of John. The moment when Jesus performs his first miracle, turning water into wine. But Veronese doesn't paint a small biblical vignette. He stages a Venetian super banquet in a grand imaginary palace. Classical and Renaissance architecture, rows of marble columns, arcades, and balconies framing the sky. A long table packed with guests in shimmering silks and brocades, seated frontally across the middle of the painting. In the foreground, servants haul huge stone jars and metal vessels, busy with the wine service. At the very center, lower foreground, a small group of musicians performs on late Renaissance instruments, including a viola, violone, and cornetto. Tradition says Veronese has painted himself among the musicians. And scattered around, a butcher carving meat, dogs sniffing for scraps, a dwarf with a parrot, and people leaning over balustrades on the upper level, watching the scene from above. There are around 130 figures in total, a whole world compressed into one frame. And the miracle? It's almost understated. Near the center, seated behind the musicians, are Jesus and Mary, calm, still, and quiet. Christ's head seems to line up with that horizontal horizon line. It looks as if he's giving a blessing to the servants below that are pouring from jars wine that moments before held only water. This understatement is intentional. It's meant to show the power of Christianity in a world with distractions. The divine moment's there, but you have to look for it. Veronese painted this in 1562 to 1563 for the refectory, which is the dining hall of the Benedictine monastery of San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice. It originally filled the entire end wall of the room. The monks would eat at long tables, and they would face this massive scene of a sacred feast, visually seated at the same table as Christ. In 1797, during Napoleon's Italian campaigns, French troops seized the painting as war booty. To transport it, they cut the canvas, rolled it up, and shipped it to Paris, where it was restitched and installed in the Louvre. And today, it hangs in the Louvre's Grand Gallery, famously facing the Mona Lisa across the room like a cinematic counterweight to her tiny panel, although this arrangement will soon be changed. Paolo Veronese was one of the great painters of late Renaissance Venice, often described stylistically as Mannerist because of his love of complex compositions, crowded scenes, and theatrical elegance. But where Florentine Mannerism often distorts bodies and faces, Veronese leans into glowing color, luxurious surface and costume, architecturally precise space, a sense of life as a grand pageant. He specialized in these huge banquet scenes like this, religious stories staged as spectacular public events, packed with contemporary figures, political references, and fashionable details. When the Inquisition later criticized him for filling another big Last Supper scene with jesters, soldiers, and animals, he refused to repaint it. He simply changed the title to The Feast in the House of Levi and left that picture exactly as it was. That example is Veronese in a nutshell. Devout subject matter, but an almost defiantly worldly way of contextualizing it and showing it. The wedding at Cana is important to include in this video, and on several levels. It's the largest painting in the Louvre, one of the largest canvases of the 16th century. It blends sacred narrative with a snapshot of Renaissance elite life, a biblical miracle staged as a Venetian social event. So this is part of the function of what art does. It helps relate our myths, our religion, our values to our current times. Its architecture, its perspective and color become a benchmark for later artists trying to balance vast crowds with a clear focal point. And the painting also carries a political story. It's one of the most famous examples of Napoleonic looting still not returned. Venice now displays a high-tech, full-scale facsimile in the original refectory, while the original remains in Paris. So when you stand here looking from the Mona Lisa to this enormous banquet, you're not just seeing a miracle story. You're seeing layers of power, taste, conquest, and restoration, all in one frame. And after this ocean of faces and noise and spectacle, the Louvre gives you something completely different. Next, we're going to look at a quiet, intimate sculpture of two figures, locked in a single moment of breath and touch. The last one on this list is a beautiful sculpture and one of the most important sculptures in the world and in the Louvre, and it seems like so many people in the Louvre skip right past it. That's why I did a list of top 12 instead of top 10. The Louvre is the greatest museum in the world, and we just needed more room. You can't miss this one. It's called Psyche Revived by Cupid's Kiss by Antonio Canova. So this is one of those rare artworks, so gentle that you lean in to feel what they feel. The moment here is drawn from Apuleius's Roman novel, The Golden Ass. It's the ancient story of Cupid and Psyche. The story goes like this. Psyche, a mortal whose beauty enraged the goddess Venus, has been given a cursed jar. She opens it and falls into a death-like sleep. Canova chooses the precise instant after the tragedy, when Cupid arrives to revive her. Psyche lies on a rocky base, drapery gathered elegantly at the hips. Her leg extends outward in classical repose. Cupid kneels above, his wings raised in a dramatic, protective arc. His right arm supports her upper back, steadying her as life returns. Psyche's arm lifts towards him, fingertips lightly touching his hair. Their gazes meet in the fragile breath between unconsciousness and reawakening. It is not a grand action scene. It's a moment of quiet resurrection. Canova sculpted this work in Rome for a Scottish aristocrat and collector named Colonel John Campbell. It was created as a private masterpiece, meant to be viewed up close, where every soft transition in marble could be appreciated. Only later was it acquired in Paris, eventually becoming one of the Louvre's most admired marbles. Canova later carved a second version, now in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. Antonio Canova is considered the greatest sculptor of the neoclassical movement, reviving the ideals of ancient Greece and Rome with a modern refinement. And here is what makes this sculpture uniquely important. Unlike the Winged Victory, who's proclaiming triumph, or the Venus de Milo that we saw earlier, who's expressing divine perfection, Canova turns classical art toward the personal. He shows the human heart, not the hero. Walk around the sculpture, the composition spirals upward like a dance in stillness. No single viewpoint dominates. Each angle offers a new harmony of wings, arms, and drapery, a careful choreography of forms that continuously guide the eye. It looks as though the figures might complete the embrace if you turn your back for just a moment. Here, at the end of our journey, Canova leads us with this truth: that classical art is not only about gods and victories, it can also show the instant that love brings a soul back to life. So the Louvre may very well be the world's greatest museum, and now you were here. The Louvre is a conversation spanning 5,000 years of human creativity, and you've stood with me before the gods and the victories, the revolution and the resurrection, the pain, power, beauty, and hope. You now share a story that stretches from ancient Babylon to the heart of Paris today. Most visitors see these works in chaos, elbow to elbow with 1,000 strangers, but you took the time to look closer and to understand, and that makes all the difference in your understanding of art and of the world. If you loved exploring the Louvre in this deep dive with me, wait until you see what's waiting across the world. Check out my video on the top 10 masterpieces at the Met, New York's greatest treasures, an encyclopedic museum from the beginning of time to today. Or check out the top 10 masterpieces at the National Gallery in London or at the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. My goal is to do top 10 or top 12 best masterpiece videos for all of the great art museums, both in the world, in Europe, and in the United States. So stick around. Many of them are already completed and can be watched in just the click of a mouse. All right here, all for the curious, and all for people who believe the world is a museum, and we get to explore it together. Go ahead and click on my playlist to explore the great museums of the world.